Hey, everybody, how are you doing today? Hopefully fantastic. We've got some super exciting stuff that we're going to cover here today, talking about kind of all things credit. And I've got a super powerful woman. She's in my lower right-hand corner. And I had the pleasure of meeting probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, just regarding credit. So we're going to introduce her. But our goal today is I've been in this industry for 25 plus years, and I've heard a lot of different things said about credit. What are shopping windows? How does this work? How does that work? There's a lot of misconceptions. We'll call it fake news because that's something that people talk about today. But I think there's just a lot of misconceptions and things that as mortgage advisors, mortgage professionals, people in the industry, we can just do a much better job of educating and informing our clients today to help with the successful closing, but also setting them up for successful home ownership. And credit is one of those key pieces that will cost you a ton of money in all areas of your life. So what we want to do today is we're just going to dive in. We've got a bunch of questions. We're going to try and keep it 30 to 40 minutes on here and then open it up to a bunch of Q&A and hopefully answer any questions you have. I've got pages of notes for Sue, and I think that we could talk for a couple of hours about these things. But I'll give you guys just a quick rundown of myself. I've been in this game since the late 90s. Bill Clinton was our president when I got involved in the mortgage industry. I didn't have an email, so email didn't exist. I carried a pager, and our credit reports came out on this paper with these little perforated things on the edge that you had to peel off. My little sister called them ludies, right? And today's my mother's birthday as well, so I want to give my mom props today as well. But so 25 plus years in the industry, I've seen a little bit of everything. I've helped launch some brokers, have done a ton with different salespeople, and here to really just help all of you do a little bit more. And our special guest today is Sue Buswell. She's a credit expert. I said in some email someplace like 40, almost 40 years. It's not, it's more than 30, but not almost 40. Been a credit expert. She's done a bunch of different stuff, worked for affiliates of TransUnion, Equifax, mortgage resellers. She was an originator at a point. Now she does consulting and helping people out inside of the credit space. And all the people I've met in my 25 years, nobody knows more than she does about this space. And then, hello, Sue. How are you?
Hey, John. I'm doing great. Thanks for the nice intro. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And then we also have my brother, Josh, here, who does all things marketing, funnels. I don't really know what he does. He does all the things that I don't understand, which is a lot. And super powerful individual there, too. Just helped my business out and a bunch of other people out of town. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, good. Hi, guys. Hi, Sue. Great to meet you.
Hey, Josh. Nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Sue, anything else you want to add there about like your credentials or what makes you really special in this space? I know you love talking about yourself.
Well, I'll just say that so when I started in the business in 1985, I was producing those RMCRs that came out on those dot matrix printers that your little sister seemed to enjoy the tear-offs from. So back in those days, it took about 14 days to get a credit report delivered to a lender. And that took a runner, meaning someone in their car going and making visits several times a day. So I commonly said this, I started in this industry before FICO. So I really had to learn credit at a very intimate level, if you will, from the TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. I think even in those days, they were still going by Chilton and some of those other names. 1995 rolls around and we have credit scores and we need to be able to explain them to our customers. And I did the normal, for about 60 days with my customers going, no one understands it, you just have to have it. And then that's just not me. And that really started my, quest for making sure that I can provide consumable credit empowerment to people, whether they're mortgage professionals or consumers, and just make our credit system easier to understand and navigate. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. So I have, and if anybody has questions too, if you want to throw it in the notes, we can definitely get to those. But I just have kind of some credit questions for you. And I'm going to start off with the exact question that I reached out to you about months ago. And that had to do with shopping windows. Like, what is a shopping window for one? What are they? And this is just an area that I hear everything from 30 days to 60 days. It doesn't matter. So can you shed a little bit of light on one, what a shopping window is and really what they actually are?
Yeah, I absolutely will. So shopping windows are the option where a hard inquiry will either be ignored by the score, and that happens to our mortgage inquiries. So a mortgage hard inquiry is ignored by the current FICO models 2, 4, and 5 for 30 days. Then there's a second process, or also called a shopping window, if you will, and that's what's called a deduplication process. So two bureaus, Equifax and Experian, use a 45-day deduplication window, which means that multiple inquiries within that timeline, all for first mortgage origination, we have to be very specific about the type of inquiry that this falls under, would be seen as one. Experian has a 14-day window. So what these windows do is it allows consumers to shop for mortgage terms without taking multiple hits. I think what we have to remember is once the 30-day ignore expires, the deduplication is still going to kind of protect and keep those scores, in that group. So for 45 days, multiple inquiries, Equifax and TransUnion are counted as one. Experian, it's a 14-day window. So, John, you got to stop me. I'll keep going. I'm going to stop there and we'll see where we go from there.
Now, what I hear in the industry all the time is it doesn't matter. Once somebody's pulled your credit report, as many lenders can pull it in a 30-day window with no impact. That's not really true because, right, you may get deduplicated, but one's going to start counting them at the 14-day mark. So
right.
That's a misconception that people have, and I think that's just said all the time.
Yeah, it is, but it's also very difficult to explain this to where it makes sense because the impact of an inquiry is extremely personal based on the individual's credit report. So one of the things I think always makes me crazy during Christmas time is if you're out doing your shopping and they say, well, apply for a credit card and you'll get 5% off and it won't affect your score, it'll only be 5 points. That cashier is not a credit expert and they cannot say with any certainty that it'll be 5 points. For someone with my kind of credit history, it might not impact me at all. I could take on multiple credit inquiries within a 12-month period and anywhere between 5 to 8 inquiries in a 12-month period and have little to no impact on my score. Someone who's in their teens, 18s, 19s, early 20s, just starting out, 2 inquiries could be significant impacts in their score. So I think we need to get less hung up about trying to describe inquiry impact. And especially in the mortgage space, I feel like we need to be utilizing more of the soft pull because then it's a non-issue, right? If you're utilizing soft pulls correctly in mortgage lending, then those hard pulls should be something that's only happening once you've understood and the client understands the impact. Could it impact their score? Absolutely. But it's all going to be dependent on how long they've had credit, what kind of credit they've had. So it's important to be able to answer that question to your customer. The initial mortgage inquiry wouldn't impact you, but you do want to be thoughtful about how many mortgage lenders are making hard inquiries on your report.
And I think that that's a great point and something that a lot of people are very sensitive about these days with the cost of credit, right? Like as a lender, as a broker or what, right? Like there is a significant difference between a soft pull and a hard pull.
Right.
So the soft pull, and what are your thoughts kind of on the pricing? I know that you've been pulled into that and it was kind of a big debate as the prices first went up. There was a lot of talk about it. It seems to have kind of died down. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing about people just suck it up at this point?
I think that the initial conversation of credit report cost impact most of our small lenders, right? Because we're still seeing on average a pull to close ratio of over 70%. So over 70% of credit pulls are not closing. And what that means is all of those credit pulls that didn't close are trying to be recaptured in a cost, way through that maybe 20 to 30% of loans that did close. That's difficult in today's market when the average cost to produce a loan is $11,000. So there's a lot of conversation about credit report, the hard cost up front. One of the pieces that came out that does have me questioning, right, the soft pull. The soft pulls went up higher than the hard pulls. Well, profits follow volume. And so the repositories increase the cost on the soft pull, which is the product that the majority of mortgage lenders are using today. And that's the reason for that. Then we have the FICO increases happening. If I were a mortgage lender, I would be utilizing a cascade process where I start with a single soft pull and I look to see where my borrower is at. Now, John, I've had these conversations with customers, with mortgage brokers, with lenders, independent mortgage bankers for over 20 years. And the one thing I hear is, oh no, I can't pull a single bureau. Yeah, you can, because if it's 500 or 550, then you have an indicator. And I understand it. One score is not indicative of the mid score. Cascade up to the second score, because I can absolutely tell you that if two scores are 550 and below, the third score is not going to be your winner chicken dinner. I was just having that conversation with one of my reseller partners yesterday. So there are so many mechanics of cost saving measures within your credit resellers that if you're not utilizing them today, you're costing yourself money. And that was one of the things as a credit reseller that I was able to bring to my customers. Let's take a look at a single bureau soft pull. If it's really low, then you need to start having some conversations like we used to do in the 90s with our customers, right? And take it away from a transaction and make it more about where are they really at in their credit journey? Do they understand their scores, right? And there's a great option for mortgage lenders where if you see that, if you pull that single bureau and it's really low, and you even cascade up to the cost of a two bureau and it's still low, send your customer out to myfico.com. They will get, under the advanced version, it's $29.95 a month, but they will get their FICO 8, which will be monitored monthly. And they'll also be able to get their mortgage scores. 2, 4, and 5 are provided, as is our future score of FICO 10T. So there's a multiple strategies of cost savings that mortgage lenders can do. As far as cost reductions, I don't see that happening. We have initiatives coming where we're going to be adding new score models to our existing score models. So whether we go to a buy merge or we stay with a tri merge, once FICO 10T and Vantage Score 4 become part of our credit report, we'll still be using 2, 4, and 5. And that's something that we need to start understanding today, because credit report cost will not reduce and likely they will go up. So you need to build a strategy around cost reduction within your own office.
I think that's a great point. We're working internally with a company called FinLocker. You're familiar with them there. Mm-hmm. To where, we can offer it for our clients to be able to go ahead and sign up for our version of that, where they can get some basic things, right? If your credit score is 800, right? Like I'm not overly concerned about my credit score when getting pre-approved, but right. I do know that there's, a lot of other things, and you've touched on like 13 threads that I could pull on any of them right now. But, so like just having that basic fundamental of where you're starting from is super important. And do you envision in the future where a consumer will be able to go and get their own credit report and then take that and use it in different places? So the consumer will go and get their credit report and go and use it. I know that I talk to a lot of people in the, like in the non-QM world where they're not dictated by Fannie, Freddie, those kind of things, mm-hmm. to where I've had some conversations with people there that are looking at doing different things, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to get into all the FICO models here next. But do you envision that there will come a point where a consumer will have their credit report and they will take that and shop that to lenders versus lenders having to go out and buy it?
I think that there are companies that are building towards that world. I'll say that. And it's more, I would say, future state than immediate future state. So I think the mortgage industry very specifically moves slow in adopting. We have to remember that the FHFA proposal of new scores at a buy merge were proposed back in October of 2022. With a timeline that should have us right now in February making some of these changes. And only a few lenders are actually making them voluntarily. So the mortgage industry will very slowly adopt consumer permissioned or consumer access credit reports. What we're seeing is a huge movement, which I am a fan of, consumers being able to report different type of debt to live credit. Because our current society is built on the fact that you have to have credit and debt to have a score to get employment, to get a car rental, to get all of those things. And that's one of the things that in my almost 40 years, so 2025 will be my 40th anniversary in the industry. That's one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of, is helping people understand. I dropped a post in LinkedIn today. So John, I'm just going to do a quick little Sue knows a score on LinkedIn. You can follow me and read the information I drop. But I was talking about alternative credit, rent, utility, telecom, all of those things. That doesn't hit all of our models as far as scoring, but it could be active on our credit reports, and that can create different issues. So do I see a future of consumer permissioned or consumer owned credit data? Perhaps. We have to remember the stakeholders, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Are they going to give that up where they're selling that credit information? Or will they simply, right? Because right now, to go back to what I was talking about, you're pulling a soft pull. You might pull a second soft pull when the customer comes back. You might pull a hard pull. You've just paid the credit bureaus 3 times for that consumer's file. And I think it's going to be a difficult business process for them to change.
And then they're selling the credit trigger on the back end as well.
Oh, that's a whole nother, onion to peel, isn't it? Yeah. So the triggers have always been a big thing. When I was in the credit reseller world, I think one of the things that always vexed me about that is some of the people that called complaining about the trigger leads, taking business from them were the same ones who were buying them, so they've got them going in the back door, but going out the front door. Trigger leads, I think anything where the consumer has not given permission to have their credit report accessed or have their desire to get credit sold. That's really what's happening, is their desire to buy a particular process or product is being sold. That is something that I'm hoping the newest piece of legislation will change, but quite honestly, it's the 4th piece of legislation on trigger leads, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll say that. I'm cautiously optimistic it'll make a difference. A lot of people are talking about the FCC changes. I read through the FCC comments, and it seemed to be very specific to websites. And that's going to be a little bit different when it comes to John taking a call today from Sue, doing a credit inquiry, and then that lead being sold. So I think we need experts to speak into that FCC changes as to whether or not we're going to see any immediate changes in the mortgage trigger space. I just know that as a consumer, I've had up to 80 phone calls in a day, and this was shopping for insurance, not mortgage. So crazy.
We touched on that. We spoke about the FCC changes just last week, right? And how that's going to impact, right? And is it the sale of a lead or is it the sale of data? And how's that all going to happen? And again, right, another quagmire that could take days to sort through.
Absolutely.
Josh had actually asked a question here in the chat that I'm just going to touch on quickly. He said,
sure,
in the cost of talking about, if it does cost, if you're paying $100 and you only, per credit report, and 20% of them are converting, right? So Josh says, why does the loan officer care when the founder or the company's paying for it? And if you've seen anything over the last couple of years, the loan officer should care, because as the company pays for things and they make less money, the person that gets pinched is not their family vacation doesn't change. Right. What happens is your comp gets cut. You get crappier leads. They don't buy the same leads. You no longer have slushies. Your compensation is directly impacted. And every loan officer that's sitting out there, I don't care who you work for, you've got to look at your business as an entrepreneur and take responsibility for your company's P&L. If you're pulling credit because your sales director, right? I worked at the Big Red Machine for years, where a metric was number of credit reports you pulled per day. People pulled credit, so their sales director, gave them the data boy on people that would never do a loan. Like Dan Gilbert did okay, but it cost him money, right? We pushed an activity and it cost him money. The credit bureaus loved it. But at the end of the day, right, everybody that's out there, you've got to look at whatever you do, wherever you work, as an entrepreneur, that you're building a brand, and the cheaper you can run ultimately is the more your company can pay you. So if you're not wasting money, there's more in the pot for you. So just something to keep in mind. Sue, you had talked about, and we're like already at the 25-minute mark, but you had talked about, and you throw things out like people know about it, and I do now. But you had talked about FICO 2.5, T10, Vantage. There's all these different things out there. And I know that they all, like, my extent is that they all look at different things. Can you just quickly, like, if we can, and just really fast, just the difference in the FICO models, or just that what they are, and then what is a Vantage score?
Sure. So FICO 2, 4, and 5 are the models that we use today in mortgage lending. FICO was introduced in 1989. Implemented into mortgage underwriting in 1995. The models that were implemented into mortgage underwriting in 1995 had actually been perfected in 1993. So these models have been, redone and updated and updated and updated. Vantage Score FICO is also a publicly held company. So if you've read any of my posts about FICO scores and the price increases, you'll see what that means. Vantage Score was founded in 2006. It is a partnership between TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. And the interesting thing about the Vantage Score, and I posted about this again today, is it's going to give around 39 million people who are considered credit invisibles the ability to have a score quicker than a FICO score will. So real quick, what are the qualifiers for each score? Vantage Score requires 1 month of history within the most recent 12 months. FICO requires 6 months of open and active history from the point of the credit pull. So if your credit history is 8 months old and it hasn't updated in 8 months, but you had 6 months of history, you won't have a FICO score, but you'll have a Vantage Score.
And something I'm super bullish, and I say it all the time, if you follow me on anything, that home prices are the cheapest they will ever be right now. Right? Like I don't believe you will ever get a home cheaper than it is today. Granted, right? Like it becomes dilapidated or turns into like a meth house or something. But homes as a whole, this year we were supposed to see this big crash in the housing industry. Well, it went up like across the country, back to the same levels of, imagine if 39 million more people have access to credit that didn't today. First-time home buyers are where are they all going to live?
Right.
Right. Do you think home values, there's now all these people that want to buy houses? Do you think values are going to go down or possibly go up? So I would just super bullish on where housing goes as credit models get better, as more people are focused on first-time home buyers, Gen Z, millennials. I mean, heck, there's people in their 50s that are out buying a first home. So
that's right, John. And I think what we have to remember, and again, I'm going to reference the post I did today, and I did it very purposely because I think it's going to be a great kind of tool for people to go back and look at from our conversation. If you are using these credit building tools today, while you'll have a Vantage Score in a month, you will not have a FICO score. And then if you're using something like rent reporting, or you're using something like Chime, if you're using your telecom, those items are not calculated in today's FICO scores that are used for mortgage lending. So while you may have a credit report and a score using something like the FinLocker app, who uses Vantage Score 3.0, who sees all of that information on your credit report and has programmed it for their score, our current models 2, 4, and 5, while the data might be on the credit report, it is not going to be part of the score. So there's a strategy to talk to your first-time homebuyers about. That's where you want them to, give you an idea. You pull that single bureau file. If you're seeing that telecom data, if you're seeing that other information on there, it's not going to impact their credit score, right? Not the mortgage credit scores. It is not there. It's on FICO 8. It's on FICO 9, but we're not using that today. So we need to make sure that we're telling those consumers, great, you've got to start, you've got to score. Now go out and get a credit card, a department store card, Home Depot card, whatever it is, get some standard credit. And we need that to show 6 months of history, right? We have to also remind our home buyers that this telecom data, this rent data, some of these other things that are alternative credit data types that are not scoring under mortgage scores can affect your debt to income. And while your debt to income is not calculated into your credit score, it's a huge part of qualifying. So the pieces are so intertwined, John, we can't just really talk about one or the other. But hopefully, again, if people go back and look at today's post from Sue Knows a Score, they'll see what I'm talking about, and they'll be able to coach these customers into a summer buying.
Yeah, and if you guys will include Sue's info, and it's on a lot of my stuff. Sue posts a ton on LinkedIn, is kind of her jam. That's her main spot that she is. I haven't seen her on TikTok yet. So that's where Sue's at. She lives in Arizona. She's up in the mountains someplace. You'll see her out in the snow doing different things, and it does snow, but that's her spot. So go and follow her there. Great insight. She posts all the time. Tons of data. So that's the place for Sue. Yeah, the credit invisible thing is something that's really huge. I'm just kind of looking here. You touched on it quickly or briefly there. Tell me a little bit about authorized users. How there's different ways that can impact them, not impact them, can be helpful. can actually be hurtful, counts, doesn't count. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Sure. So an authorized user account is, I talked with an individual this week and they inspired me to make some changes to my website, but an authorized user account was I'm going to say it was a cheat for a lot of people in trying to get a score, but it can be a great way to instantly build credit. So I'll use a personal story. My brother, who's in his 50s, needed to reestablish his credit. He needed to rent an apartment. So I set him up as an authorized user on one of my cards. And while he didn't get a credit card, love my brother, but not paying his bills. So he got my credit history, which gave him a score and allowed him to rent this apartment without having to put in a ton of deposits, et cetera, right? He's taken that and he's now gone and opened a Home Depot account. He's working with his credit union to get an account there. So an authorized user should be considered a ladder or a stepping stone. In the case of the mortgage broker that I spoke with this week, his customer needed to establish a score for a home that he and his wife were buying. His wife had credit, but he was not a credit user, but they needed his income. We run into that in the mortgage space every day. Because they're married and their finances are mixed, and it's going to be a joint loan, my suggestion was, if it's a major MasterCard Visa, have her call that creditor, add him as an authorized user, and ensure that they report to all three bureaus. In 45 days, he'll have a score. In mortgage underwriting, because it's a joint loan with joint mixed income, it won't be ignored, or they won't be required to remove that debt from their credit report with the thought that it could be unfairly impacting his scores. So authorized users can still be a good tool. Unfortunately, when I research this, I do see a lot of websites out there like Tradeline Builder and some others that are still doing the old style cheat or whatever it is, where you pay someone to be an authorized user on their account. I simply say no to that. It creates an issue for you because you don't have commingled assets. You're not a joint borrower. It could get you a score, but it's a problem. So we want to stay away from that. So if it's an authorized user account and the individual that you are authorized on in mortgage lending, it's not commingled income, et cetera, that item will be oftentimes requested to be removed from the credit report to get a true and accurate score.
I get some questions all the time, and I've seen it, over the years, and we don't talk about it enough in our industry. When you get somebody that's got their credit is just, they're beat up, right? They make 40 grand a year. They've got $70,000 of credit card debt. They're going late on things. They're like in a really bad spot. And the servicing world tries to limp them along and extract every penny out of them. And last week we had Jamie Noel with National Debt Relief on here, right? Like there does come a point where people are just in a bad spot. And right, like I'm not advocating you go and file bankruptcy, and there's laws and different things, but we do run into clients all the time that they're just in a bad spot. What's your advice for somebody that like they don't have a lot of options and I know that you can navigate a bad spot, like regardless of how bad your situation is, we can always do things to make it worse. Mm-hmm. What would be some steps on your end to like help that client maybe weather the storm as best as possible, or not have it be something that's still chasing them around in 10 years?
So on my website, SueKnowsTheScore.com, I do have some information about late pays and how they affect your credit report. So anyone who wants to go out there, you can grab that document and utilize it. So that's out there for you. I think there's an interesting question that's in here is if someone is deeply, deeply in debt, how does their credit report, what would their credit report look like with a bankruptcy versus a settlement company? How long will it take for adverse information to be less? And I always tell people when I'm teaching them about credit, your credit report is like a scale, right? You get too many bads to goods, then it's not good, right? You can have some dinged up credit, but you need to have more good credit than bad credit. And another thing that's going to help dinged up credit is length of history. So I think that there are valid reasons for people to file bankruptcy. My heart goes out to some of the people in our own industry who have been laid off 15 months, 20 months. They've exhausted their savings. Their credit has taken a hit. They're living off their cards. And there's many in our society that are in this credit dependent space. So can you recover from a bankruptcy? Absolutely you can. Can you recover from a debt settlement? Absolutely you can. What we have to remember is any item on the credit report that's negative has a timeline on it. It can only be on your credit report 7 years from the date of delinquency. So if you got delinquent on your Chase card in June of last year and you never caught it up, and they didn't charge it off until December of last year, your date of delinquency is June. You've got 7 years that item has a possibility of staying on your credit report. So you have to think about it. How do I balance that? I need more credit than bad credit. Same thing with a bankruptcy. Anything that goes into a bankruptcy is going to be rated a 7, shown as a bankruptcy. There are things that you can do in any instance. If you have a card that you've not already maxed out, use it. Be careful with it. Protect it. If you're going to do a settlement, understand that there's 2 significant implications of any kind of a credit settlement. One is a tax coming to you. So there's tax implications from settling debt because that creditor wrote that off, and they're generally going to send you a 1099 to show as income because that was a debt that was forgiven. That's first. The second part is that settled for less than full balance is a negative comment and is being weighed by the scores. So I just think it's more about, if I have a single late date, how do I recover? That's pretty simple. Time heals all wounds. When it comes to delinquencies, they're weighted by 3 things: severity, frequency. So how severe is the late? How often is the late? And I've forgotten the third thing, which flew out of my head, John, so I'll have to come back to that one. But those things, how recent to the date of the credit pull brings weight on that delinquent item. And then how severe is it? A 60-day or 90-day delinquency is going to count harder against you than a 30-day delinquency.
And one thing too that Sue didn't mention it here, but often when people are dealing with a bankruptcy attorney or something like that, understand that they're not a credit expert. They're there to collect a fee to file the bankruptcy. And I think Sue brought up a really good point. If you have 5 credit cards and 4 of the 5 are in just their hit, and you've got one card that it's still good standing, keep that out there, right? Like that's your card you're going to use moving forward and reestablish, where a bankruptcy attorney will just they'll just look at every card and throw them all in there. Well, that one's not bad. Don't BK the good. Like don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Exactly. I think that's just a really key point that Sue did not touch on, but she would have. And I'm just going through here. I kind of want to get into a little bit of the Q&A stuff.
Sure.
But any tips for people looking at like potential first-time home buyers? I've got a son that's turning 21 here, he's graduating from college. Any tips for someone like that, short of like get some cards and pay your bills?
So get your cards and pay your bills. I think for people who are new to credit, we have to make sure that we teach them about credit restraint. That is something that as a society, we don't teach credit education anyway. We're just terrible as a nation in teaching any kind of credit. The mortgage industry is taking up that mantle, and I'm very proud that that's part of what I do, is try to provide what I call credit empowerment. But we need to make sure that when we get these young or new to credit, we let them know that, for instance, a secured card, okay? Secured cards are great for getting you started, but if you had to put down a $500 deposit and you charge $500 and you're paying it monthly, you're paying interest to the creditor on your own money. That's not smart, right? So if you get a secured card, that's fine, but never charge more than you can pay in full every month. And I would say follow that with every single credit item that you get. If you can't pay it in full every month, you shouldn't be putting it on your credit card. And I know that sounds, high and mighty, but it's talking about what our future scores will be. And our future scores are going to include trended data. And if you don't know what trended data is, it's a whole new way to determine whether you're a revolver or a transactor. A revolver is someone who pays their minimum payments or maybe a little bit more every month. They're probably paying on time. Nothing wrong with that. Transactor pays their statement balance in full every month. They never pay interest, and they're going to have a higher score than a revolver in most circumstances because of that. So it's a good habit to get into now. So you have to have credit to get credit, but you don't have to be beholden to your credit.
I think that's a great point, and it impacts, I tell my kids this all the time, it will impact every area of your life. You're going to pay incrementally a little more on your car insurance, a little bit more on, you name it, you pay more. Employers look at it, right? If you're getting licensed for the NMLS, they look at it. So it's one of those things that at the time, right, today, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it will impact you for the rest of your life. So credit is super important. I've got something here on my notes that says Paul Harvey, right? Only a few of us will even know who Paul Harvey is, right? But it's the rest of the story.
Right.
And I think something that has happened to our industry as a whole, and I'm a sales guy through and through. I like to talk about sales and I really I'm passionate for helping clients. I've been doing right for a long time. I think something that happened back in 2016 where there was a Super Bowl ad and it was push button, get mortgage. And it moved our industry from this point of being consultative and looking at a client and digging into their credit reports and asking questions like, what happened that you didn't have a balance 2 years ago? Now you're maxed out. And it went to purely what can I qualify you for today? So we went from trying to provide great advice to a client to trying to only qualify them, right? There's a Flack movie, Boiler Room or something, right? Where he says are you Debbie the Time Life operator, right? Just an order take. And something I want to encourage people to do as you look at credit, start looking at your clients and really being a loan advisor, dig into their credit report. If their balances are way higher today, ask them what happened. Mm-hmm. If they are 55 years old, and this has nothing to do with credit, but if you have a 55-year-old client that has 20 grand in their 401k, you need to look beyond the closing today and look where are they going to be at long term. If they're coming to you and have a bunch of debt and nothing in their 401k and they want to do a 15-year mortgage, you may have to step back and say, did you know at 55, you can send in twice as much to your 401k? Does your employer match? And start looking at second and third degree consequences and not just the loan that you're going to sell today. Because often we close somebody on a loan and it's not putting them in the holistic best spot for them to win 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is down the road. So I want to really encourage you, dig into credit reports, lean into your clients. We're no longer in an industry where it's just pushing a link for somebody to fill it out. There was the whole fintech revolution. And I think that we're doing disservice to a lot of our clients just trying to qualify them for a loan instead of actually selling them or advising them on what's best for them.
Yeah, John, I'll speak into that for just a minute if we have time, but I have a good friend of mine who finally bought a home last year and, he's in the credit space. He gets it. We work together. And when he finally got into the home, I said, how do you love it? I'm so proud of you. You reached your goal. And he's like, I had no idea how expensive owning a home could be. That's a problem. That's an absolute disservice to our home buyers that we as loan officers, as originators, as an industry are not looking beyond the initial transaction. And that's really what being this next gen loan advisor is. And as John said, maybe not next gen, maybe we're just going back to the future, right? We used to do this in the 90s and the 2000s before everything was supposed to be automated and we didn't have to have any humanity in what we're doing. But now it's different. Our home buyers demand more experience. They demand more expertise. And just think about, you close that loan, you're going to chase that guy for a referral or for something, right? Why not close that loan, setting him up for home ownership success, where he's going to give you referrals? You've set him up for the ability to purchase his next home, right? And you've helped him see how to be a better credit steward, how to manage their home, the cost, etc. It's just, I see this all the time in people getting into homes and being completely overwhelmed because they were caught up in the dream of home ownership and being a homeowner, but not the reality of it. And that would be a difference maker to your pipeline for years to come, to just take that approach.
Yeah, just because somebody can doesn't mean it's the best thing. If you've got somebody that can scrape together 20% for their first home, but they don't realize that when you move from one place to the next, you throw away your ketchup and you buy new. And it's $8. Right. And you throw away all this stuff and you got to buy trash cans, trash liners, moving boxes, clothes hangers. And you now have, this 10 grand of stuff that you didn't even know about. And you're heading into home ownership behind the 8 ball from day one because your loan officer could get you, your payment was $12 cheaper without PMI.
Right.
You've got to ask. I see it all the time in the investment space too, where, people want to have a goal of buying 10 houses, but then they talk them into doing 50% down because they can avoid some loan level price adjustment. Well, their goal was to buy 10 houses, not to get the best deal on one house. So it's really just, you got to open up your ears. We have two for a reason. And I think a lot of the industry struggles today because they're in the push button, get mortgage mentality, and they're not looking at it holistically. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. If they want to throw them in the chat, we'd be happy to take that. I can keep talking about these things like for a long time. I have a little thing that tells me how much I talk. There was one slide that I just wanted to, I have a thing that tells me how much time in a meeting I talk. And I try to keep it to less than 50%. Sue's great because she talks a lot. Like it's easy to do with her, but normally like I just babble a lot. I did have one last slide. And if anybody has questions, you can throw them in there. There's probably a way for me to unmute you. I don't know. I'm old, so I don't have a lot of, not super tech savvy. I did want to share one screen. I saw this recently on a LinkedIn post, and I thought that this was super powerful. And this has to do with the widening the gap. So if all the things that we're talking about here, credit and everything, all is around home ownership. All these new people that are going to become homeowners. This goes back to 2010, and it's looking at the gap in net worth. So in 2010, a renter had an average net worth of about $5,400. And over the last 12 years, they've doubled that. Somebody that was a homeowner back then, they went from 187 worth to almost 400,000. Like, home ownership for a lot of people is their path to wealth and something that they're going to be able to pass on to their kids. So this is just, I share this. The stats were from something from the Fed, and I don't remember, who I stole it from on LinkedIn, but I just think that something like, let that sink in for a second, that the, average homeowner has almost $400,000 of net wealth. And the average renter in our country has a little over 10 grand. So just, we'll leave that what it is.
If we don't have any questions, I'll just kind of lean into that a little bit, and I'll talk a lot like I do. I did a post last week where the rent reporting has added about $20 of revenue to our economy through individuals who didn't have a score before they were in a rent reporting program. And while home ownership is a goal for a lot of those, it allowed them to get credit cards and auto loans and student loans. So when you look at those renters that are sitting there not building their net worth, they are building the building blocks to get into a home if they choose to do so, and then to see that worth come to them. Again, I'm going to go back to those score models and say 4 and 5 are not looking at it. It's going to be FICO 10 and Vantage Score 4 that we need to get adopted into the mortgage lending space so that we can get these millions of credit invisibles and underscored borrowers into the idea of home ownership if it's right for them. Going back to that conversation you need to have, because just because they're a renter doesn't mean they want to be a home buyer. But $26 billion in new revenue just from rent reporting, that's substantial.
Yeah, it's just we have more people every single day. And
we do.
One other thing that I got a question here in the notes about emailing that slide, definitely can. And I'll mind even if you don't follow myself and Sue on LinkedIn, or you're a loan officer that's not really out there on LinkedIn, I think that Facebook and those places are great for, like motivational TikTok, kind of stuff. If you get over into the LinkedIn world, I think there's a lot more education and learning that happens there. So just something to think about if you're not there, give me a follow, Sue. There's a ton of great people out there and a lot of resources, but I will email that back out. I'll just post it. I'll post that slide right out there. Too many people rent versus own. Over 30 years, it's always cheaper to own. That's a good little comment there. You will win as a homeowner. Most people do. Sue, you also have on your website, I know that I saw it there, and you're making some other changes. You're going bilingual, which is cool. But you have I'm trying to find it here, what it's called. You have a credit buyer's guide. You have a credit guide on your website that people can go and access. Mm-hmm. And you're taking it, you're going Hispanic with it. Your website's going down to South America, and you're changing it up. You're going bilingual. Is that correct also?
Yeah. So I put all of this information on my website. So if someone were to go out to my website, they've never been out there before, there's multiple sections to go into. A credit tips for all section has an opportunity for someone to download for free the FinLocker, the private app. That's what that is. So that's an app for Homebuyer Journey. You're also able to go in and check your credit report. And then I have all these guides in here. So in talking with an individual recently, I took that credit building guide. So if you'll scroll up just real quick, John, Thank you so much for that. Down just one more. I think we'll almost be there. All right, perfect, right there. So see the building credit, and then it's going to open up. Just download it and take it. This is information you can use. Print it off, give it to your customer, download it, email it, whatever you want to do. This is a credit building guide from Sue Knows a Score. And back on the site, you'll notice a little spot that says Hola, and that's where the same document, and you'll see the language is all in Spanish. So I'm working on getting these documents onto my website, converted into Spanish language, because we need to be able to serve all borrowers. And it was a conversation I had this week with an individual, the one who was saying, well, here's a couple, they need to buy a house, they've got good income, he has no score. And it made me realize that while I put a lot of good information on my site, I was limiting who could use it. So I'm going through the process now of converting those documents into Spanish language.
Yeah, and what we'll do, we're going to take this video when it's done. You can go to the Mortgage Broker Builder. We've got a section on our website that's a blog. There's tons of data on there, posts, YouTube videos. We will put a link back to that download. So we'll put a link in there so you can go download it there, along with the video from this, we'll put a bunch of info there to make it easy to go to one place that can link you back to everything else.
That's great, John.
Josh, you got anything? Anyone else?
I mean, yeah, I would say a couple of things just on that point with some of these guides and things like that you're giving away. If you can reach a borrower and they're in a place where they're not quite at a place where they can buy, but you're the person that guides them along that journey because you give them credit tips and you guide them to improve their credit score, it's so much more than just a singular transaction, right? It's a customer that you'll have for life. Especially one of the things that I really loved that you guys talked about was being a loan advisor, but it's even more than a loan advisor. It's being a financial advisor, even though that's not our title. Because if you think about it, who is the one person that knows the most about anybody's financial situation? A mortgage loan officer knows more than their financial advisor does. Financial advisors don't check credit. They don't look at credit scores. They don't look at debt to income ratios or anything like that. They just want to know how much money you have. So when it comes to home buying or giving somebody a mortgage, figuring out how it fits into their overall financial picture so you can actually be a guide for them on their path, whether they want to become a real estate investor or buy a larger home in 5 years or any of those things. And remembering that and, really having that relationship like I said, as their loan advisor and as their guide through their financial journey is going to get you more deals, more referral partners, because you can refer them to other people that will then refer them back to you, vice versa. And so you'll just create a significant amount more value in the marketplace. And so that was the biggest takeaway that I had from a marketing perspective on this, is just be a loan advisor and guide people through things, regardless if they qualify right now or not, because they will one day.
Absolutely. And if you've watched anything on Gen Z, they are hungry for credit empowerment. They want to work with someone who's not just going to put them in a home, but is going to make them a successful home buyer. And that is, those are our borrowers coming up. So it is absolutely incumbent upon everyone to be a loan advisor and not just a transactional loan officer.
It's imperative for the ones that want to be successful. If you want to, if you want to chase calling credit triggers today, great. But if you go out there and capture 10,000 kids that are seniors in college, you capture them, put them in a database, you will have some business over the next couple of years.
I'll tell you, John, I know we've got that question to answer, but if you can get someone in that space, in that college space, imagine not just them and their friends, but their family, because you have no idea that their family probably does not have, they would have had the education if their family knew it. So the opportunity for expansion by being a credit advisor and providing credit empowerment is unlimited.
Yeah, well, that's why, companies have things like Rocket Money. They have that because it feeds a bigger machine. So, and I've always fancied myself, Josh brought this up, but I've always fancied myself as a debt planner, right? Like you got a financial planner, they handle that side. I handle everything on the other side. And right, I've been saying I was a debt planner since, 1999. Pre-Y2K, I've been a debt planner. Chuck asked a question here, the All-American, about is there an easy way for clients to opt out of credit triggers? I know a lot of people that do this, but we'll let Sue answer, is there a way that I can opt out of my data being sold by the credit bureaus?
Yeah, optoutprescreen.com is where you need to go for that. You need to understand that it's not immediate and they can't do it on the day that you're going to pull their credit report. So optoutprescreen.com gives you multiple options to get your name off those lists. Remember that when that happens, it's forward moving. So any lists that have been sold before, you could still get calls from. So if I'm talking to a customer today and they're in the market for a home, that's the first thing I'm going to tell them is before you start applying with other lenders or even with me, go to optoutprescreen.com and let's get your name off of any list. Let's make sure you're not going to have your information sold and other lenders calling you that you may not be interested in talking with. It generally takes about 24 hours for that to go through, but to be safe, I generally recommend that you do that at least 3 days before they apply for credit. And then they have an option to do it for, they have to make sure they read through the optoutprescreen.com. There is a 5-year opt-out option. I would opt out for the longest amount of time that I absolutely can.
I know.
I'm looking at it right now because I'm like, this is awesome. I'm filling this out for me right now. And there's actually a forever option, but you have to mail it in. There's a forever option that's not online, but I'm like, this is awesome. I didn't know about this. I know some super powerful mortgage peeps that they do this on behalf of their client, right? Like we're talking about your pre-qualification. Hey, Sue, you've got 2 options here. When we go ahead and we pull your credit, we're going to look at a softball. It looks great. I think we're going to be able to help you. We're going to want to go in and do this as well, or you're going to get like 50 calls from people at all hours of the day. Which would you like to do? Great. And they fill it out 100% of the time. It does not fail. And they don't get credit triggers, and they're actually helping the client. So that's a pro tip.
And how often do you think those clients stray, John? It's not going to happen.
A lot less than if you leave them out there and let somebody, call them 22 times to tell them they can give them a better rate and fee.
Right.
So no, we'll include that in there as well. Well, we're out of time here. I just want to thanks Sue a ton for coming on. It's always beneficial. I get stuff out of it. I thought I knew everything I needed to about credit, and every time I talk to you, I glean a couple of little things out of there, which is just great. And we can always learn and get better. There's probably a second conversation in here, but please follow Sue. Go and look her up on LinkedIn. She posts every day with different things. If you're at a company where this information could be beneficial, maybe to come in and talk to all of your people, get her with your sales manager, whoever. She's a consultant. She comes in, she can help your whole company have a little training on this where your whole company gets better. The return on investment on that is huge. So Sue's there. We thank you. Josh, thanks for putting this together. And any suggestions that you guys have for future topics, things you'd like to hear about, please let us know. And some favors that I have. One, if you see me post anything, we're like kind of grassroots trying to do this that's beneficial. If you could forward it to your friends, family, those, like people that it might help. We've got a Facebook group. Would like you all to be part of that. So we've got a Facebook group, and that's probably how most of you got here. So join our Facebook group, follow us, chase us around the internet, and we'd like to help you make more in 2024. Awesome.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.